cracking open a fresh 7-Up. That's some good stuff. 0 sugar, 7-Up. So you're gonna watch one video in this group, ever. Never mind every other video I've done. This is the one that you should watch because it is super important, because this really gives you a context as to why I bash on diets so much, why I think that crash dieting is such a bad idea, why I always suggest that a slow and steady approach is really important, why I talk about sustainability, and basically why I consistently make myself less than marketable in the health and fitness space. And that is because diets can mess you up badly. Like, continually dieting and eating in a deficit for long periods of time can have some very profound effects on the way that your body functions. And I want to cover those. Okay, so this is like the red flags of dieting, the dangers of dieting, what happens to your body when you diet. Okay, so right off the bat, your body is super intelligent. All right, it wants to maintain homeostasis very badly. I've talked about this before. It does not want to change. Okay, and that means that every time you're dieting, you're moving away from homeostasis, and your body wants to go back to homeostasis. You do have a body fat set point. Okay, so it does want to maintain a certain set point of body fat, which is why it can be very hard to diet, among many other reasons that we're going to cover today. I'm going to try my best to be succinct with this and not get too nitty-gritty and cover things too in depth, but I do want to stress that these are real factors. They are incredibly important factors, and these are things that you should know before you commit to dieting. So, your body has a self-defense system when you're dieting. It is typically looked at as a 3-pronged self-defense system. All right, step 1 is what I talk about the most, which is metabolic adaptations, right? So when you diet, your body undergoes metabolic adaptations to slow down your weight loss. Step 2, you are going to have different genes and turn on. So your epigenetics are going to change to flip on your genes to make genetic and hormonal changes that make it harder to lose weight and easier to regain weight. And then the third prong is its self-defense mechanism to keep you from losing weight in the future, right? So if you go through a diet, your body recognizes that as famine, and it goes, in the future, I don't want to go through this because it sucks, so I'm going to stop this from happening in the future. All right, so those are the 3 components of your body's self-defense system. Now, sticking with components of systems, you need to understand metabolism to understand the body's self-defense system. So your metabolism, made up of 4 different components. You have your BMR, or your basal metabolic rate. That is the largest portion of your total daily energy expenditure, or your TDEE. So your total daily energy expenditure, or your metabolism, is your BMR. In addition to your BMR, it is NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And that is both your conscious non-exercise activity. So like if I get up and go to the fridge, if I grab this drink and take a sip, all of that requires energy. And that contributes to NEAT. What also contributes to NEAT is your subconscious movements. So the fact that I'm talking with my hands, the fact that I blink a certain amount of times in a minute, if my feet fidget as I twist back and forth in this chair, these are all non-exercise activity thermogenesis, subconscious things that you're doing that contribute to your total energy expenditure. So total daily energy expenditure, so far we have your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, you have your NEAT, you have the thermic effect of food, or TEF. Every time you eat something, it takes a certain amount of calories to digest that food. and that makes up that portion of your metabolism. And then the final portion of your metabolism is going to be your exercise activity thermogenesis. Now, believe it or not, these are actually in descending order. So your BMR contributes the most to your metabolism, then NEAT, then thermic effect of food, then exercise activity thermogenesis. Exercise only contributes to about 5% of your metabolism. Thermic effect of food is about 10%. NEAT is about 15%, and BMR is the rest of it. So knowing that those are the components of your metabolism, what is the dangers of dieting? Okay, and we can look at dieting as it is controlled by 3 dimmer switches. The amount that you crank them up or crank them down will have a direct impact on how activated your body's self-defense systems are. Excuse me. Those 3 dials are the intensity of the diet. So how big of a deficit do you have? The next dial would be how long you diet for. So the longer the diet is, the more your self-defense system turns on. And finally, the frequency in which you diet. So if you, again, think of yo-yo dieters, someone that tries to lose weight, they do lose weight, they regain weight, they lose weight, they regain weight, flip-flop, flip-flop, flip-flop. The more frequently you diet, the more your self-defense systems turn on. So if you are going on yo-yo diets or you are going on any fad diets that put you in extreme calorie deficits, you are cranking the first dial all the way up by being in a big deficit. If you are dieting for months at a time, you're cranking that second dial up. If you are dieting on a repeat cycle, trying multiple times in a year to lose weight, you are cranking up that third dial. The more you turn those up, the more your body's self-defense systems turn on. The harder it is to lose weight, the easier it is to regain weight, the harder it is to lose weight in the future. Your body does not like change. It likes homeostasis, it wants to stay the same, okay? So, the 3 different pathways that we talk about for your body's self-defense system. The first pathway is your metabolic adaptations. This is what I talk about the most because it's typically the easiest to grasp onto as far as concepts go because you need to know the least science to understand it the most. Now, your metabolic adaptations directly impact those 4 categories of TDEE that we just covered, okay? So if you start out with your BMR, when you diet, your BMR is going to decrease. It decreases due to a whole variety of things because, you know, it's every process in your body that keeps the lights on is what your BMR is dictated by. So without getting too in-depth, the biggest driving factors for decreasing your BMR is decreasing your total body weight and more specifically your lean body mass. You can look at your lean body mass as your body's engine. It uses a lot of fuel to run. So even moving around doing the things that I'm doing right now is going to use more fuel if I have 100 pounds of muscle versus if I have 50. I'm going to essentially use double the amount of energy. It's not actually directly linked like that, but just for example's sake, you can think of it that way because it's easier to conceptualize. So you're going to decrease your BMR because your body weight and specifically your lean body mass is going down. Now, knowing this, you know why I chime so hard on resistance training. Resistance training is the biggest factor to maintaining lean muscle mass while you are in dieting, and it also is a heavy predictor in weight regain post-diet or body fat regain. I'm going to start saying body fat specifically because these are important distinctions. It has a very large influence on body fat regain post-diet because it is going to have a direct impact on your insulin sensitivity, your total energy stores being fat versus glycogen, and a number of other factors. So resistance training is incredibly important for slowing down this part of metabolic adaptations. Next, you have your NEAT, and NEAT actually typically displays the largest change in metabolism when you are dieting. So this is where you take the biggest hit. Depending on how intense your dieting is, this can be 30, 40% reductions in your NEAT. And this is something that you cannot combat. You cannot fool NEAT. If I am dieting really hard and I'm going deeper and deeper into a deficit, those subconscious processes are going to lessen. I can't control that. I'm going to blink less. I'm going to have less spontaneous activity. I'm going to talk with my hands less. I'm going to be less apt to get up and walk across the room to grab something. These are all things that take place under your subconscious or under the level of your consciousness. You don't make these decisions. They make themselves for you. So you will for sure decrease your NEAT via the subconscious changes. You can do your best to combat decreasing NEAT by controlling what you can control. And the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is just keeping an eye on total daily steps, which is something that I implement in my system when I work with clients. Keeping an eye on total daily steps or number of walks per day, because if you at least try and keep those consistent, you're controlling a large portion of your controllable NEAT. Overall, it is still going to drop no matter what. In one study, they looked at, in a number of studies, they looked at individuals that lost 10% of their total body weight, and just losing 10% of your total body weight correlated to a 400 calorie per day decrease in NEAT. So if you're an individual and you're starting with a 2,000 calorie TDEE and you lose 10% of your weight, say, for example's sake, you're 200 pounds, you lose 20 pounds, you're now 180 pounds, your metabolism just from NEAT dropping is likely down to 1,600 already. And that is a predictive number. Your body overreacts aggressively. In almost all measures, the overreaction is significant compared to predictive. And we'll get into that in a minute. So, then you have your thermic effect of food. While this doesn't technically change, it does decrease in a diet because you're eating less food. So your thermic effect of food is less because you're getting overall less calories, which means you need to use overall less digestion. So your thermic effect of food is also decreasing. Then you have your exercise activity thermogenesis, which you might think, oh, this is going to stay the same because I'm going to do the same workouts. But it doesn't, because again, your subconscious a lot of times is actually telling you what to do and you don't get to have a say. So even if you're doing the same workouts and you're pushing as hard as you were before, that is just you perceiving that you're pushing as hard as you were before, and you're actually not. It is consistent across studies. Your exercise intensity decreases, the amount of calories you burn during your exercise decreases, even if you are doing these same workouts. So something that is important to note with this is adding cardio can help, but only briefly. And to explain that, I just want to give a very top-down view of a certain concept in physiology, and that is the constrained energy model. And so if you think of, you have your total level of energy expenditure for the day, all of this is your necessary energy processes, okay? And then this is voluntary energy, and then the top bit is reserved for exercise energy. You would think as you add more exercise, you would raise the ceiling because you would increase more total energy usage, therefore you would burn more calories. But what actually happens is you get to a certain point, and instead of raising the ceiling, you drop the floor and you start cutting into your voluntary energy. And if you exercise even more so and you're really pushing it to extreme levels, you'll cut into your necessary energy reserves, because your body will have a certain amount of calories that it will use in total per day, and you can't really push that ceiling up with tons of exercise, which is why, if anyone has worked with me in the past or works with me in the future, you will notice that I do not add tons of cardio, because at the end of the day, for body composition changes, it ends up being pretty pointless. You get a modest boost in your total calorie output, but it quickly adjusts to it. Your body learns that as your new normal, and it expects it. So you're just burning more of those calories and cutting more into your reserves. which means if you start adding more and more cardio and you're doing 2 hours of cardio a day on top of workouts, you're going directly down and you are for sure cutting into those necessary energy reserves. So your body's gonna start functioning worse and worse, and you're gonna feel like shit a lot faster. So just something to keep in mind, especially if you're programming for yourself. You can't just infinitely raise the ceiling on exercise because there is a constrained amount of energy that your body will use. And as you push exercise to the extreme, you are just going to do damage to the necessary processes in your body. Okay, so that is the metabolic adaptation section. That's what I talk about most of the time. It is the most tangible changes. It is very easy to look at and understand the numbers on it. And you can say, like, I'm doing this activity, therefore it is impacting me on this end. And that is your metabolic adaptations, which is prong 1 of 3 of your body's self-defense systems when you diet. So now we get into prong 2, which is epigenetics and hormonal changes. I will definitely be referring down to my notes more frequently on this because, like I said, this is stuff that I generally talk about less often. So, which necessarily means I look at it less often, which it gets refreshed less often. But when you are going into an energy deficit, one of the first things your body does is increases its efficiency. If you want to burn weight, you want to be a Ford GT Mustang. You want to rip through fuel. You want to be incredibly inefficient. But as you diet, your body turns into a Prius. It uses energy incredibly well. It becomes very efficient. So it increases the efficiency of your mitochondria, which are the energy house of the cell, which everyone knows. Okay, so, or the powerhouse of the cell. What's the meme? Powerhouse of the cell, for sure. Anyways, your mitochondria get more efficient at producing energy. One other thing that happens pretty quickly is your uncoupling proteins, which are kind of downstream from ATP production. Any physiologists, don't kill me on this. But essentially it makes your ATP production less effective and it generates heat. So it generates metabolism. These go down, so you generate less heat, you use less calories, your body's becoming more efficient, and this is, what's the best way to word this? From what we know, we can assume that this is why when you are dieting and you start getting lean, you're just cold all the time. Is because these uncoupling proteins basically shut off and you stop wasting energy to create heat. So those get downregulated almost immediately. And so your mitochondria get more efficient, your uncoupling proteins shut down, so you stop wasting more energy. As you lose fat, it's important to know that your body has generally a specific amount of fat cells that it likes to hold. Okay? And so when you're gaining weight and losing weight at a slow rate, what happens is, well, gaining weight at a slow rate, you just fill those fat cells up. When you're losing weight, you shrink those fat cells down. You don't lose fat cells. There are situations where you can gain fat cells. Your body doesn't like to, but you can. We'll get into that. So you have your fat cells, they grow, they shrink. All right, so as you lose fat, your fat cells shrink. Back in the day, we thought that fat cells were transient. They were just energy stores. They are energy stores. They hold a lot of triglycerides, but they're actually metabolically active. You might have heard people talk about white fat, beige fat, brown fat. The darker the fat is, the more metabolically active it is because it has more mitochondria in it. And the adipocytes, or fat cells, are also producing hormones. Okay, so your fat cells have a direct correlation to the amount of insulin that is produced in the body. So as your fat cells shrink, you produce less insulin and you become more respondent to insulin, which health-wise is good. Gaining fat-wise, that is bad because you have a cell that is shrinking. The fat cell is saying, I want to stay at a certain size, but now it's smaller and wants to get back to that same size. It wants to suck energy up, and you're becoming more and more insulin sensitive, which means when energy comes into the body, it is more efficiently stored into fat. But we'll get more into that later. So it has a direct correlation to the amount of insulin that is produced, and it is also directly in charge of producing leptin. So leptin is like your master fat gain, fat loss hormone. And the more fat you have, the more leptin you produce to say, hey, we're good here. We have plenty of energy source. The less fat you have, the smaller those fat cells get, the less leptin you produce to signal to your brain, hey, we need more energy, and triggers fat storage. So leptin has a direct impact on your metabolic rate, on your hunger, and a whole slew of other issues. So as it goes down, your metabolism follows it, your hunger goes in the opposite direction, and it essentially helps make your body more efficient at storing fat. This is another one of the situations where your body overreacts and sways the amount greater than what you are actually losing. So as you're losing fat, we would predict based off the amount of fat that you would lose X percent, but the amount that you lose and stop producing is actually a greater amount because your body really doesn't want to starve. And at the end of the day, weight loss is intentional starvation. So, and then I starred this, even after your weight stabilizes, your leptin levels will remain decreased. Okay? That's important when it comes to regaining weight. Because at the end of the day, everyone that loses weight, vast majority of people are very successful in losing weight. They just don't keep it off. Within 3 years, 95% of people that lose 10% or more of their weight will put it back on, and a very large amount of those individuals will go on to put more weight on in the future, which is because of the self-defense system. A lot of people that are losing weight are doing so following diets that are put out by people that want impressive before and after results. So they push aggressive protocols on them. They follow the protocol, they lose weight, they get the after picture. They don't give a shit about that person's after the after picture. That person regains weight, usually a lot more weight. So some other hormonal changes that happen, your T3 and your TSH change. Your T3 goes down, your TSH goes up, and this drops your metabolism. T3, TSH, those are thyroid hormones. Your sympathetic tone, so I always talk about parasympathetic and sympathetic. Your fight or flight, rest and digest. Usually I'm talking about wanting to be more rest and digest. When you are in fight or flight, your body much more readily breaks down fat tissue to use for energy because it goes, hey, this is important. We need energy now. You're going to increase your noradrenaline and your adrenaline and your norepinephrine and your epinephrine stores, which is going to make you break down fatty tissue at a faster rate. But when you are dieting, you are in a calorie deficit, your sympathetic tone, that fight or flight, decreases across the board. So you're going to be less amped up. You're going to be using a lot less of those neurotransmitters that are going to help you break down body fat. Your ghrelin is going to increase. Ghrelin, for those of you that don't know, is your hunger hormone. So as that goes up, your hunger is going to go up, your cravings are going to go up, you're going to want to eat more food. As you can imagine, if you have ghrelin going up and you want to eat more food and your insulin and your leptin is down, saying, hey, put energy stores into me, being your adipocytes or your fat cells, that is a tough combination, which is why the more you diet, the more the self-defense system gets activated, the harder it is to stick to the diet because that ghrelin's going up and saying, eat, 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 and your insulin and your leptin are going down, 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 saying store fat, store fat, store fat. So cortisol also going up, so your stress hormones going up, you're just more stressed in general. Other satiety hormones will decrease, so you're just not going to be as full. And all of this together basically make your fat cells hypersensitive and makes you more irrational. You're worse at decision making. Your cognitive function goes down. You're hungrier. Your cravings are up. Generally, things just aren't feeling great. So this makes it that way after your diet, when the diet is done, you get to that end stage, you are going to very, very, very much so prefer storing energy in your fat cells. Okay, and that brings us to prong 3, which is making it harder to lose weight in the future, and that is due to changes in your adipose tissue or your fat cells. So, like I said, your fat cells shrink. That is going to decrease your leptin. That is going to decrease your insulin, which is going to make them more sensitive, and it is going to say, hey, bring nutrients into us. Your ghrelin going to go up. You're going to get more hungry. Your sympathetic tone is going to decrease, so you're going to oxidize fat even less. Your thyroid is going to function worse because it's saying, stop burning energy. We don't want to do this. Stop. And all of this together puts you in a very unique metabolic situation where you can actually produce more fat cells because you are putting your body through famine by choice to lose body fat, moving away from that set point, away from that homeostasis that you want, and your body does not approve at all. And so it signals, put energy towards fat, put energy towards fat, put energy towards fat. So if you eat in a surplus after your diet is over, if you have no diet after your diet, if you don't have someone that is helping you to slowly increase calories in an appropriate manner, or you don't have it laid out for yourself where you know how much to increase your calories by, and you don't have a plan afterwards, you just hit the end of that diet, you feel great, you splurge, you are going to add new fat cells into your body at an alarming rate. So, one study that was done by MacLean et al. Found that in an overfeeding window post-diet, the number of fat cells increased by 50%, okay? So they doubled the amount of fat cells they have. And you might think like, oh, okay, but you just want to get back to that fat set point. The fat set point goes by the size of your fat cells. So your body wants to get those fat cells back to their original size, but now you have 50% more of them, which means when those fat cells get back to the original set point, because you go through this big post-diet binge and put on a ton of weight, not only have you put on all of your old weight, but you now have 50% more fat cells that are also at that same size, which is why you put on more weight than you lost, okay? And this is a huge, huge issue, especially with incredibly restrictive diets with big deficits, because you torture your body, you crank these dials up, those dimmer switches go all the way up, your body self-defense system flags hard, you plateau, you push even harder, you plateau, you push harder, you hit that goal weight and you go, thank God, that is over, I'm done dieting, I'm going back to how I eat, you put on all the weight like that in a drop of a hat. I have done it, promise you, it is incredibly easy. The first time I did a bodybuilding show, I had no goddamn clue what was going on, okay? I was just listening to my coach. They did not give me a diet after the diet. And the show day ended, we took a picture. He was like, sick, you placed. I was like, sick, I placed. He's like, good job. Post-show rebound, you're gonna get huge. Awesome, I was stoked about it. I didn't know any of this stuff. And oh my God, did I binge eat. I binge ate, I don't know how to say that, so hard. I blacked out in a bathroom at Boston Burger Company. My ankle swelled up to the size of my knees, literally. I could squeeze in about an inch into my ankle and let go and it would stay there because I developed pitting edema. I absolutely wrecked my body and I put on something like 30 to 50 pounds within a month. It was horrible, like absolutely terrible. So I for sure have way more fat cells right now in 2022 than I did in 2016. Confidently, I would say confidently that I put on at least 50% more fat cells when I did that. And for me, that showed because after that show, if I don't pay attention to diet, I don't pay attention to what I'm eating, I absolutely put on more body fat than I used to before I ever did bodybuilding. My body fat set point is higher now than it was in 2015 because before I was very easily staying about 8 to 10% range. And now with the same level of effort and attention going into my diet, I stay between 13 and 15%. Granted, I'm much healthier now, I'm much more conscious about it, so it's easier for me to control it. But I can tell you anecdotally, this for sure happened to me. I understand it, and I cannot stand seeing other people go through diets like that. It makes me so mad because I know that I did a ton of damage to my body that I can never undo. And so if I can help other people to avoid that and not do that damage, that's phenomenal. That's a 10 out of 10 for me. That gets me fired up because no one should be dealing with that, honestly. Anyways, I digress. So you produce these fat cells because your thyroid's shot, your insulin's down, your hormones are all out of whack, and you put on new fat cells to make it even harder to lose weight in the future. All right? That's the three-pronged system that your body has when you diet. The intensity with which you diet, as in the amount of calorie deficit you have, the deeper the deficit, the more it turns on. The longer you diet, the more it turns on. The more frequently you diet, the more it turns on. So if you're doing any of these things, your diet after the diet needs to be equally as aggressive as your diet, if not more so, because your body will always overshoot in a deficit. I actually wrote some numbers down for that. They looked, Russo et al., they were following a male bodybuilder. Okay, this is a 200-pound jacked dude. He starts out his diet at 2,424 calories. Okay, he follows a 24-week diet and loses weight. The predicted maintenance level at the end of the diet was 1,973 calories. His actual maintenance at the end was 1,283, which is a 35% further decrease than predicted. So based on the amount of weight he lost and following the numbers by the book, he only should have been down to 1973, but he was actually down to 1283. 35% past that, pretty much cut his metabolism in half in 24 weeks. That's a serious issue. The Biggest Loser. Huge scandal because these people were losing weight and they'd go and they'd follow up a couple years later and they were all bigger. They were all struggling hardcore because they didn't have lifestyle changes. They were put into a stressful situation. They were forced to lose weight following extreme protocols. They lost that weight. They left. They went, holy shit, that sucked. Went back to living normal life, even if they maintained some of the habits. They put the weight right back on, plus some. They did a 6-year follow-up for the Biggest Loser contestants. 6 years later. And their metabolic adaptation was still down 20%. So these are lasting impacts. When you diet recklessly, you fuck your body up. Every time. Your body is incredibly intelligent. It has developed to defend itself against dying because at the end of the day, your body gives way more of a shit about not dying than it does about looking good and social stigma and anything else. Its number one priority is stay alive. So it has a very, very comprehensive self-defense system, which means when you diet, it has to be done intelligently. You have to understand how much weight to lose to not crank it up too much. You have to understand when to stop. You have to understand what you're going to do afterwards. And most importantly is you have to be building sustainable habits so that way even after you're done and you're not following that calorie deficit anymore, you've worked your way out of the calorie deficit, you're at a new low, you spend time building a new set point. You're going to maintain habits to keep that weight off and keep yourself healthy. Because if you ditch the habits, the weight's coming right back, that self-defense system's kicking in, you're producing more fat cells, you're storing way more fat, and you're screwing yourself in the future. So I don't mean to end on a super negative note, but this is incredibly important to me. This one is very close to my heart, just because I know that I got screwed previously. And while I'm in a much better place, I don't want to come off as condescending or unsympathetic to people that have real weight issues. But it just irritates me that I decided to work with someone in the past that didn't know what the fuck they were doing, and I have those consequences with my body years later. And so if I can help anyone else avoid that, that's great. That's why I say watch this video. If you're not going to watch anything else, watch this video, understand the consequences, and really take a step back and think about your diet plan. If you are going to lose weight, it needs to be lifestyle changes. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to be something that you go, I can probably still be doing this 10 years from now. Because if it's not, you're inevitably going to lose weight, get sick of it, regain the weight, and be in a much worse position than you were when you started. So that's it for this week, guys. I hope you find this educational. I will be talking about metabolism for the rest of the week. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any topics that you want to cover, let me know. If you want me to put you on the list of individuals for the Fix My Diet series, DM me. And until next time, I'm out.